So this is a slide, but I want to talk to you about this. So Mona just asked me this question and I thought it was a great question, so I'll share it with you now. So let's say that Mona has a client and she's not able to write the offer because she's out of town. Chuck can't get in either. He's saying the site's unavailable. I don't know.
Weird. Okay.
Jamie will. Should I tell him you're going to send him?
Yeah, I will send it to him via email.
Sorry, guys.
Hey,
Okay.
Lynn, I know, Lynn, if you go, like you and I were messing with this yesterday. If you go to Google and do the Remax Gold, and then
Right,
you go down.
that does work. Yep.
Yeah, it
He's
does.
having, he can't get to the, he can't get to the calendar. So that's the problem because they're trying to do what we told them on the video to do. So, all right. So let's say that Mona is going to be out of town and she's asked John to write an offer for her because she's not going to be available. So, sorry. Sean would write the offer and sign it as the agent, but where it says MLS ID, he's going to put in Mona's MLS ID under that buyer agent information. Does that make sense? All right, here's why. Because Mona wants to get the MLS credit. If Sean puts his MLS ID in there, that's what they use to close out their file when they're entering the information in the MLS.
That's not my question.
Okay, let's do yours.
My question is that these team members that use their MLS number or ID, and then they send me an email that says, oh, put the team leader in there. And my question specifically is, what is the MLS rule?
That is a rule.
Do I use
That's what
the
what I just
contract?
said. You don't have to change it. You don't have to. But then you'll probably tick off the team leader agent, and then
But
when
what's
you write
the
an offer.
rule? What's the rule? Do I use the contract MLS? I mean, you know,
Yes.
the MLS always has these freaking rules that we have to follow. What's the rule to close out the MLS?
Yeah, what I just said. Okay, yeah, so two people are trying to get in. I don't know how to, I don't know.
Okay, I don't know that I understood.
Okay, so they're supposed to put the team leader MLS ID on the contract. That's the rule. Now you got an email that says my team member didn't do it right.
Mm-hmm.
Would you please enter it this way? MLS says you can do it, but you don't have to. You don't have to do it that way, but you're going to make the team leader agent angry that you didn't give them credit for it. And then they're going to send MLS an email and probably circle back and ask you if it's okay to change it. I don't think I'd want to tick off the team leader because I might be writing on one of their listings and they'll remember that I didn't comply with their request. So that's MLS's
for everything else under the sun, that every
Yeah.
chance they get and ding us, but that's not something that they do.
right. I get it. Yep. They're not training their agents properly. Yep.
Okay,
All right. So
I
let's
want to make
start-
sure I'm not breaking a rule.
You're not. Okay, so we'll start with number 1. Okay, Chuck made it.
I can't see my screen.
Oh, really?
No, I'm like just a small portion of the screen.
Is it like because can you see everybody's pictures? Is it taking up half the screen? And
No, I can only see a little portion of all of us too.
if you hit the Control plus, it will make your screen get bigger.
But hit Control minus to make it smaller.
But she's seeing less of the screen now.
It says it's 100%, but I only see like a little sliver.
That's what I got too.
I know Mona's laptop's kind of zoomed in.
Okay, we're gonna go on. Question 1, you represent the buyer and you write on new construction that's not listed in the MLS. How do you get credit for the sale of that property in the MLS?
The question's not showing.
There we go.
There, okay.
First of all,
It's Saturday Night Live skit.
but
I said, I thought I was on mute. I was saying this would be a good Saturday Night Live skit on how to use Zoom. Oh, that it's so
Oh, yeah.
impossible to get on.
okay. So first of all, you would have done an authorization to show, right, to be able to get paid by the builder. So, but you want here, we're really focusing on how do I get credit in the MLS for the sale that I had? The answer is you can enter the listing and the sale information in the MLS. According to MLS, what they're concerned about is that you put enough data in there so that if someone wants to use this as a comparable information, the data is there. So if it's not in the MLS, you can enter it as a listing and sale. Okay, anybody have questions about that? No? Okay.
No.
All right, number 2. You represent the buyer. The MLS reads all offers will be presented on Sunday night at 6 p.m. You call the agent and they say, we really need 48 hours to review all offers. Our sellers are out of town and they need extra time to review. You take the agent at their word. 6 hours later, you discover the status has changed to pending. Now what? As this just happened. That's okay, that's right. So remember that the law, the MREC rules and regs, you are required to submit all offers immediately
Right.
and in a timely manner. So our agent was very upset because they took the listing agent's word that they really weren't going to look at offers until 6 p.m. on Sunday night. And she got an offer, it was a great offer, and they accepted it. So what would be your strategy in this situation? You have a buyer who really wants the property. What would you do?
What can you do? Anything? It's already under contract. They've accepted.
Right,
the
but to be proactive, what would you have done? Even though the agent told you that verbally.
Oh.
Mhm. I say if you have a buyer that wants to write on it, regardless of what it says in the MLS, I'm going to write it right now and submit it. Anybody else?
How long would you give them?
Well, I agree that you never wait to write an offer, number 1, and you
Right.
always submit. And number 2 is she lied to you.
She did lie.
And
Mhm.
that's a violation of our code of ethics.
Right.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
I would say in the future, because I kind of had a similar experience. It wasn't that drastic, but similar. And I would, in the future, if they are asking to wait, I would say, I'm going to submit my offer and you can counter with the extra time that you need. You put that in writing, what you need.
Great advice, Corey. Yes, thank you for that. Okay, so if you watch in the MLS, they're putting all these words in there about all offers will be presented at 6 o'clock on Sunday night. However, and some agents go so far as to write in there, however, the seller reserves the right to accept an offer prior to that. That's great that they say it. They don't have to say that because the law is if you get an offer, you have to do what? Present it.
Presented.
That's it. So we had a lot of people were upset about that. Okay, number 3, you represent the seller and your listing is in the withheld status. Your seller tells a friend that they have their home listed for sale. You receive a call from an agent from XYZ company wanting to show the listing. You find out that your seller has told a lot of people about selling their home. Can you allow the agent to show the property?
Yes. As long as you
Yeah.
show, as long as you let everyone see it.
Yeah, so here's the thing, they changed withheld status, that we used to be able to pick up the phone and call XYZ company and tell them about our listings, and we can't do that. But there's nothing stating that our seller can't tell people. They can tell whoever they want. So I thought that was a good example of, again, with that withheld status being changed, that we can't advertise it or tell anyone about it. So
We can't show it. That was the question, wasn't it, Lynn? Can you allow them to show it? No.
yeah, so coming soon, you cannot allow a showing, but withheld you can.
Oh,
Mhm. Yep.
I thought withheld, you could only allow your office to show it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back and read that again because we did have a change, but I had this happen 2 weeks ago where a buyer's agent sent their seller over to the house. I mean, their buyer over to a house and walked around the property, and the seller let them in. And that agent submitted an offer and we got it accepted. So my point to this is watch out we can't tell other agents we have the listing. That's the issue.
Seller can, and then you can let agents in under this new withheld status.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it up again so we can go over it, because I know we did this last month, but I wanna do it one more time because they keep changing it. Okay, we're gonna move on, and I'll circle back on that real quick. Okay, you represent the seller. You receive an offer, and the earnest money is to be held by the buyer's agent brokerage, not a title company. What are the advantages or disadvantages of the earnest money being held by their brokerage? Mona?
Well, if it's Berkshire Hathaway Alliance and they feel like they've met all of the criteria to release it back to the buyer, they will.
Yeah, so
And they don't need
I'm
a
asking
mutual
Mona to say it
release.
because I don't want to say it, but I'm going to tell you it happened. We allowed that company to hold the earnest money. And during a certain point, that brokerage determined that their buyer had fulfilled their part of the contract and released the earnest money without a mutual release. I'm going to tell you that a title company would not allow that.
Because they're gonna be on the hook for it if somebody comes back and sues them over it and they've already distributed, they're on the hook for it then.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember when that happened, Lynn.
yeah.
It just happened to us with Berkshire Hathaway Alliance.
Right. It's a
And a
bad,
title company will not do that. I don't know any title company that will release earnest money because they don't want to have the liability of doing that.
yeah. Mm. I always
Okay.
have. Okay.
Question 5, you were asked to give a listing presentation. The seller gives you the green light and you prepare the listing agreement. During the conversation, the seller tells you that they are getting a divorce and it's a mutual agreement. The spouse is not going to be involved with the house. What document or documents do you need to protect your seller?
Need the waiver of marital rights.
Right.
Correct.
Mm.
Yes, that is correct. I'd also highly recommend that they speak to their counsel before, but a marital waiver, and who will prepare the marital waiver for you? Typically.
Title.
Title company.
Title. Yes.
Mhm.
even though they say, oh, it's fine, they're not gonna take any part of it. We've already agreed, we're getting along just fine.
Yeah, then
then
why are
what
you getting
happens?
divorced?
Yeah,
You're getting along just fine.
well, they were.
Uh,
Mhm.
Yeah, really.
Okay, number 6. You represent the buyer. They want to purchase a home and they will need it to lease the property for 4 months before they can close. They want to do a lease purchase. When do you typically do the inspections?
At the beginning,
At the, yeah,
Yep.
before they did the lease purchase.
Mhm.
So it's in the
Typically,
plan,
that's what you would do.
right?
So the property is in an area that requires a municipal inspection. When will the municipal inspection be completed?
When it's sold. Well, actually, they can do it because it's a new lease. I mean, when it's a lease, you have to get it inspected
Yeah,
too.
so good point. This is what happened. They did for the purchase municipal, but not for the lease. And then you've got the municipal knocking on the door because you didn't do a municipality. And there's some municipalities that do require for rent, not all. Years ago, the SLAR used to prepare a flyer for us that told us if you could have signs out, what kind of signs you could have, what the time period is on the signs, whether or not there was a municipal inspection for a rent or a purchase, all of that. They quit doing that.
Well, I will say, I'll make another comment. If it's in the city of St. Louis and you get an inspection for the lease, then when it goes under contract and it is sold, I think they make you get another inspection for the municipality.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you gotta say that you're getting another one in 4 months or whenever the lease is over.
Yep. So just
Okay.
be careful with that. I mean, we haven't seen a lease purchase. I haven't. Mona, I don't know if you have in a long time, but this actually happened last week. So be careful with the lease purchase. It might start coming back as interest rates start to climb. All right, you
The city
represent this.
requires a new occupancy inspection every time the tenant changes, but only if the tenant changes within a 12-month period. If it hasn't changed in a 12-month period, the city doesn't care.
All right,
Okay,
all right.
good to know. Thank you. Okay, you represent the seller. You receive multiple offers and the seller accepts the offer that is cash and no appraisal riders attached. Can the buyer get a loan?
Yes,
Yes.
I found
But
out.
they can't come back with the loan denial, right? What if they have an appraisal and it doesn't appraise?
Too bad.
Buyer would need the cash funds to do that if that's, if they chose to go that direction. What happens when the buyer's agent calls the day before closing and says, the lender made a huge mistake and we can't close for 10 days? Buyer's agent is asking if they can do a lease until the lender has time to process the paperwork. Mona?
Well, there's a lot of different options that you can do. Number one, you can ask for a non-refundable earnest money. You can, I mean, if you can't close, you can't close, number one. But you can also put some stipulations down to help protect the seller as best you can, but they don't have a lot of options. I mean, that's where earnest money, should be turned over immediately to the seller so that it's
Amen.
non-refundable.
Thank you. Ding, 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 to Mona. Yes. Here's the other thing. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this transaction, and the person this happened to is on if they want to chime in, they can. So the buyer was an investor, and this was a multiple offer situation. And actually the seller was more inclined to accept an offer from an individual, but because of the terms being FHA and a high interest, the low down payment, etc., the all cash offer really came to the top, right? So the buyer as an investor is getting a commercial loan, which we didn't know about. According to the buyer's agent, the process for the commercial loan required the appraisal to be in their hands 6 business days prior to closing. And according to the buyer's agent, she didn't know that that was the kind of loan he was applying for. So we're seeing all kinds of red flags going on here. So if the buyer is going to exercise the right to a loan, what do you need to require from the buyer, and how do you protect your seller? I think what Mona just said, that earnest money, making sure it's there and deposited, is huge. But I also think in today's market, let's make sure you have a significant amount of money in terms of earnest money. Because if the deal dies, you could keep the earnest money, but if you're sitting there with a small amount, it doesn't mean anything to them.
That was a very stressful day.
Yeah.
But
So
we
that
got
commercial loan, and the agent, the buyer's agent kept using words like, we'll just lease it. Let us just lease it until we can get this resolved. My answer was absolutely not. And I think what he was trying to do was get tenants in there and get a lease with income so that it looked great on his portfolio. But we pushed back enough that guess what? At 3 o'clock on the day of closing, he came with cash and closed. But we had $5,000 too. So at one point she's like, well, I guess she'll just keep his 5,000. She was getting irritated at me, but
she was a pistol.
you know, pistol.
And she's
Who was the agent you were dealing with?
Angela Ritchie. It's Ritchie, I think. She works with this investor all the time. And she was making comments like, I hate working these small deals because they always a pain in the butt. And I went, yeah, right. Well, it's not that small to me. I'll take the check. Anyway, she was kind of a little.
Yeah, she thought it was funny. She kept laughing, but at some point she wasn't laughing.
No.
I think she's done this before to a lot of different agents and they've allowed that lease back. And I'm not sure, but I'm pretty confident that's what he's doing. He's getting tenants in there and he's showing income for that commercial loan that he's getting.
Well, we showed them, didn't we, Lynn?
Yeah, that's right.
We
Okay,
so it's going to close at 3 o'clock, or we reach a contract to keep them the money.
So you represent the seller, you receive an offer on a special sales contract. There's no inspections, it's full asking price, everything is perfect until the final walkthrough. You receive a call from the buyer's agent asking where are the security cameras? Now what?
Contact have the agent it's listing, contact the sellers and say that that's part of the sale.
So first of all, let's make sure we know the difference between a regular sale contract and a special sale contract. Your regular sale contract identifies a lot of different things that are included, and the special sale contract does not list all of those things. So my first question was to our agent, what's on the seller's disclosure statement for cameras, for security system? And guess what? It was blank. So at this point, the buyer did not know that there was a security system until they saw there was paint. The paint color was different in places and discovered that there had been a security system there previously. So in the special sale contract inclusions, exclusion paragraph, what does the contract recommend on the special sale contract? What are the words in the contract that tells you to be cautious about? Anyone?
Wow.
It says to avoid any misunderstanding, the parties are urged to list as included or excluded any items which may be subject to question or unclear as to being considered a fixture such as electronic equipment. The purchase price includes all existing improvements on the property, if any, fixtures, equipment, etc. So you probably heard me say this a million times, but if in doubt, write it out. It alleviates all this kind of stuff. Our agent ended up making it right for the buyer, but we could have alleviated all of that. The buyer's agent should have wrote it in, but she's saying she didn't see it there. But if you, do you all look at your seller's disclosure statement? I know you don't touch it, you don't fill it out, but do you take 5 minutes to look at it?
Every line.
I hope you do. And Mary and I can tell you another story where there's a basement and the sellers left it blank and wrote NA. What does that mean? Not applicable.
Yeah.
Okay. When I see that, I think there isn't a basement. I think it's a slab. But guess what? There was a basement. And now what do you think has happened? There's a problem with the basement.
Oh,
The basement leaked.
That's
Yeah.
right, Mona. Oh,
no,
gosh.
it wasn't they had a swimming pool in the basement.
You know,
Well,
that's a great point too about security systems nowadays aren't like where you could walk in and you see things mounted all over everywhere, right?
no.
It might be a good practice to ask the buyer's agent, is there currently one in there? Of course, if it wasn't included in Maris and you didn't ask for it, you know, kind of thing, you're kind of SOL, but
Yep.
One of the things, guys, that Brent brought up while you guys were discussing this was, I think it's a great point, and we should be somewhat of aware of, is those ring cameras and the door, you know, little door ringers. They're also mounted indoors, so you can make those indoor cameras. And if your clients are you know, when you guys write an offer, as Lynn stated, when in doubt, write it out. Write that into your contract if in fact that's something that they want to keep with the property, or if they don't, because most times a lot of those people grab their rings and take them with them because they don't
Well,
feel like they're
we've had a
fixed,
couple of
right?
those, right, Lynn?
Yep, we had that happen. There was a ring on the front door, you know, looks like a doorbell, that kind of ring camera. And when our buyers went back, of course, they did their final walkthrough, it was there. But after closing, they go and they replaced it with a regular ding dong bell. Uh-huh. So again,
Also, because it's a registration, it's a little different because those rings are right. When you purchase it, you register it under your app, under your information and stuff. So it has to be undone and redone. Sometimes
Right.
it's a little more, you know, I think that on the one scenario, I know they wound up, the agent bought a new ring and gave it to them because they were probably happier with that scenario anyway, but something to think about.
How much do
okay, you
those
represent the
cost?
seller of a 4-family building. The seller lives in 1 unit and the other 3 units are rented out. In each of the rented units, the seller has provided mini microwaves, washer dryers, and refrigerators. The seller intends to take the provided items to his new 8-family building he just purchased. Is that okay?
No,
If it's in writing,
well, those are, yeah, those are not big, I mean.
part of real property.
So
they're not-
here's what I'm gonna say about that. On the first page of the sale contract, under inclusions, it says all items stay that's currently being provided by the landlord. So those items were provided, they stay with the property.
Absolutely.
So if you see something that, again,
Hey,
you're
Lynn?
not sure, yes,
Lynn, you're stating that they have to stay with the property? With the
yes,
sell, wouldn't it be a
If the-
situation, I'm just curious, because what if in the listing agreement, he states that these items will not be, they will not stay?
So the sale contract trumps that, right? Anything, the sale
So they can-
contract
in a
always
si-
trumps.
So then the sales contract, they would have to still state that they need all the appliances to stay, correct? or no?
So it
Gotcha,
would be
okay.
your due diligence as the listing agent, when you get an offer, to counter back and say, these items are not staying.
And
Because we're
the,
typically, we look at that as personal property, right? But the contract says if the sellers provide any items that the seller is currently providing for a tenant stays.
Well,
And that happens a lot. A lot of times a landlord will provide that. Mona, did you have your hand up? Yep.
I did. What about the rental writer, the rental verification form? Because it lists the items that are also being provided for the tenants.
Yep,
That's part of the sales contract as well.
yep.
they
But
should
the
be listed on there.
contract says it stays. So the writer, I would counter back. If you don't want those things to stay, I would put it in the MLS. These items do not stay. And if you get an offer, you have to remember whatever the contract says supersedes the MLS.
Yeah.
But it is.
Lynn, Kay has a question here, Lynn.
Yep.
One other thing too is like if any of those items belong to the tenants, you know, because like sometimes maybe the tenant. replaced the
Right,
refrigerator or
it
whatever.
says any items provided by the owner. So if the owner provided those items to the tenants, they stay. But if the tenant brought them, they don't.
Right.
It's
Right.
only
And that would-
items.
That would be
You
done
want-
at the
oh,
time that
sure.
they're
Hold on,
doing the
guys.
contract.
Kay still wants to finish her question. Hold on a second.
My point is just that I would make sure to clarify that what is the tenants and what is not, because, you know, I've had situations before too, where it was something that belonged to the tenant. And then that information wasn't given to, wasn't disclosed to on any of the property information or on the contract. And then, you know, when it came time, it was like, oh yeah, by the way, that doesn't belong to the owner. And it's like, well, now,
What happened?
well, actually, we had to do an amendment to put it in there to say that what belonged to the tenant and then what belonged, you know, just for further clarification.
You know what, Lynn, this might be a cool little scenario because this happened to me like 15 years ago when I was selling real estate. But remember Michelle Watson, remember she used to work with us? She had a deal, it was weird. She had a home that their buyers were gonna buy. And they said appliances to stay, you know, the simple thing that y'all, appliances to stay, refrigerator, whatever. Well, they had this, you know, I don't know, a refrigerator maybe with an ice maker. I'll give you an example.
Oh, yeah.
The day they closed, they took that refrigerator and they put another refrigerator that's not the same one.
Uh-huh.
with no
Yeah,
ice.
It had happened.
I ended up having to pay like at that point, $800 for a new refrigerator because it wasn't the one that they left. And again, this falls under the due diligence and making sure you write it out, because that's one of the lessons that I kind of learned. I'm like, well, you know, it took us forever to fight these guys out. They said, no, we said we were gonna leave a refrigerator, not this refrigerator. And it was to the point where it was nonsense. So we're like, you know what? Screw it. I think it was like $800 of a difference, you know, so here, you know, we'll give you what that is and let's just move on. But that also shows you that you need to be very, very aware, right, of what the MLS states, what the seller disclosure states. When you write your offer, be very clear if appliances stay, how to format that to make sure that they're not gonna do a swap on you. I mean, I hardly ever done it, probably that's the only deal that I ran into that's ever done that. But, you know, you never know.
Yeah, we have had a couple of those throughout the years. And it's the point of being so specific. If you represent the seller, you need to make sure that you're clarifying that. If you represent the buyer, you need to make sure you're clarifying that refrigerator, that GE, whatever, blah, 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 that, you know, because I think that people just write it and think that it's just going to be assumed. But even in this scenario, you know, the seller was the one who disclosed that he provided all the equipment, right? So if the seller disclosed that he provided all this information, that needs to be The protocol needs to be, make sure the rental property writer with verification that you're talking about matches. It's that detail that you're gonna get into that specific detail. You need the best detail you can possibly add to that documentation.
I'll give you a tip. Here's something, keep this in mind. You're the buyer's agent. You go in and they have a really nice refrigerator, okay? I've already had the building inspector take a picture of the information inside. There's a little metal plate in there that identifies the numbers, the serial number and all that. Because there were refrigerators throughout the house. And my concern was, what if they move one out? That was, if you're concerned, that's what you could do. But again, identify, if in doubt, write it out. The refrigerator currently in the kitchen with the GE blah, blah, blah. Do that. Then,
You know what?
because guess what? If they put that refrigerator on a truck and they're headed out of town, I don't really want that refrigerator back, because now it's been on that truck and mishandled and all that sort of thing. Probably not going to work right anyway. Now, then we end up in a situation where now we have to have money to make everybody happy.
And that did happen not that long ago, Lynn. I don't know if that's the one you're talking about or not. But
Yeah, yeah.
the other thing that when you're negotiating contracts where you have a scenario like this and something's going to be left in the home, it's great to do that follow-up before the thing closes, to contact that agent and remind them, hey, this refrigerator, blah, 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 we're expecting that to be in the home at closing. Just a reminder, because I think that, you know, you do the contract work, you think that that's kind of seal it in there, but we've had each one of these scenarios, we've had one of everything.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Okay, number 10, you represent a buyer. The property they are looking at is in close proximity to a high school. They tell you there shouldn't be any sex offenders in the area because it's close to the school. They ask you what you think. What should be your answer?
Look it up. Look it up on the computer, because they have all that on there.
So my answer is, I don't know, but I'm going to recommend that you contact law enforcement agency. So don't get all wrapped up in what you think the answer is, because this definitely can happen. And we are, that by law, we're not allowed to be involved in that. Okay, anybody have questions?
Can I jump in?
Yes.
Yes, Corey.
I'm trying to remember where I read it, but it seems like there's somewhere that says the buyer is responsible for looking up sex offender registries.
I saw that somewhere too. Where was it?
Well, the buyer is responsible for looking. They're not.
It's on the contract.
It's on, yeah, I think it's on the contract.
It's right there in bold, actually.
Right.
But we tend to want to be helpful people all the time, because that's our industry. We are service providers and we want to help everybody, but this is a situation you need to stay away from it. You don't know? Call the local law enforcement office. I'm sure if you Google it, you'll find something.
There's nowadays, you know, there's so many ways and avenues that you can look up that information. Well, not you, your client can look up that information, to include viability of school districts, so on and so forth. Anything surrounding that home and what they're looking for. There's tons of information online that's very readily and easily accessible.
I have many of my buyers just say, I've already checked it out already. And I said, that's great that you did that. It's over.
Yep.
It is in paragraph 10 in the contract under inspections.
Right.
That is correct, Corey.
Oh, yep. Okay, number 11, you represent the buyer. There's a very expensive media system in the house and your buyer wants to include it in their offer. What will you write in the offer? In special agreements, what are you going to write in? Or under inclusions, what are you going to write in that section? So I'm going to tell you a story. I had an agent do this. They wrote in all media systems, the whole media system stays. Everybody's having a great day, buyers move in, And they have these nice Bose speakers throughout the house that come off of that media system. So my thought was, well, okay, they move in, the Bose system is gone. The speakers are gone. They've clipped the wires. They pushed the wires down through the wall, and they took a little toothpaste and they filled it in. No system. So this is why you see now in the contract, it says flush mounted speakers stay. But if you have a system and you see Bose speakers and they are not flush mounted, you need to write that in as well. And a lot of people are putting all these media systems in now. They're having the, down in the lower level or something, they're putting in the media for watching movies and that sort of thing. And it could be, that's an expensive mistake. Anybody have questions about that?
What is flush mounted? Is that even inside the wall?
Yeah, so I don't know if you can see it or not, but that would be a flush mounted right here,
Okay,
right here.
okay.
Like up in the ceiling. Can't be cut, because I was always trained from a new agent that if you turn the house upside down and you shook it and it didn't fall out, then it stayed, but it's not true with speakers.
Or TVs or anything else nowadays.
Yeah. So TVs, do TVs stay?
They're mounted, don't they?
No.
They do not. The mounts stay, the brackets stay, but not the televisions, because you can lift it off. TVs are pretty inexpensive today too. They used to be flat screen like that was expensive, but. So just be careful with speakers. That actually happened.
I had a
Okay,
guy
we'll move
leave.
on. What?
I had a guy leave the TV and everything, but he took all the wires back and all the connections. He took them with him. Nice
They
guy.
don't- They don't leave the remotes too sometimes.
Right, right.
Well, the contract says all remotes, and I'll tell you about that too. All remotes stay. That includes, you have the windows, the draperies and things like that that are on a remote, they'll stay. So they
The
have those.
old man's everything.
Right. Mhm. So you represent the buyer. You're writing an offer on an 8-family unit. Your buyer's offer is accepted. In the basement, there are 10 brand new window air conditioning units in a box on the shelf. Who owns the air conditioning units?
The seller.
Dollar.
Nope. What's included? All window air conditioning units. That's included. It doesn't say they have to be installed. It says all window air conditioners stay. And I can tell you, a lot of
That's an
landlords do
argument right
that.
there, buddy.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a fight.
Yep. So guess what? A lot of landlords do that, right? They buy them up at the end of the year. They're cheap. They buy them up. They're in boxes. They're sitting there. They stay because the contract says so. Unless, of course, you write something, the seller counters back and says, hey, by the way, those air conditioning units in the box in the basement don't stay. I would recommend you take them out, move them somewhere else before you put it on the market. But you know what? If you have a landlord that owns a lot of apartment complexes or a lot of investment properties, they may buy them up and store them in the basement of one of their units just because they got them on sale. Okay. Who's responsible for completing page 7 of the residential sale contract, meaning lines 316 through lines 332? Brokerage,
Buyer's
licensing
agent.
information.
Buyer's
type of
agent.
Buyer's agent.
Yes,
Buyer's
ma'am.
agent.
Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah. I'm telling you, if you're, in this market, you're in a multiple offer situation and you have an agent who doesn't complete that, I think you're starting off in the wrong foot by not doing your due diligence as a buyer's agent. It's your job. You're supposed to fill it out. Where do you find it? Where do you find the listing agent? What kind of agency the listing agent's in? How do you find that out? Where's that? Where do you find it? How
It's
do you
in the
know if they're
listing
a
in the MLS.
correct? If you print out the agent only format, I promise you, it's always in the lower right-hand corner of that report. And it tells you the kind of agency that the listing agent's in. We typically, I'm gonna say probably 1 out of every 5 offers we receive in this company, they put us down as the wrong agency, and we have to turn around and do an amendment to correct it.
Especially the designated agents.
Yes, that's right, Mary. It's always wrong. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Mona's
have
got
a question.
Yep.
I have a contract right this second that I filled all that information out on. Of course, I'm dealing with some crazy out-of-state company. And they said they were a seller's agent, so of course, that's what I check. And so they don't do a proper counter. They just send me an email and tell me what they want changed. And they call themselves a designated agent. And I, of course, argue back that they need to change the MLS and they won't do it. The MLS says they're a seller's agent, but they want the contract changed to designated agency. So in order
You
to get
send
my
me that, I'll
contract,
take care of it. So you can send it to me, email it, I'll take care of it.
okay, because I've changed my contract to say designated agency, just because I need to get my contract accepted, because, you know, it's tight market right now. So it says designated agency on my contract, but the MLS says seller's agent. And I'll send it to you.
Okay, yep, I'll take care of it. So
Thank
you
you.
represent the seller.
The
Their
buyer.
condos look,
Oh,
Buyer.
sorry.
okay, I moved on to question 14. Okay, you represent the seller. Their condos located in the Central West End. You receive an offer and your seller immediately accepts the offer. All the inspections are completed and you receive a call from the seller that says, I just received notification from the condo association. They claim there's a first right of refusal on my unit. What is a first right of refusal? This happens, there's quite a few of them actually there in that Central West End corridor. So the condo association may have the first right of refusal. So gives them an opportunity to buy the property. All right, so this clause allows the seller to market the home at will, but before any offers can be accepted, the seller must notify the original interested party who has the first right of refusal. At that point, the person with the first right of refusal can decide whether they want to buy the property. If the person declines, the seller is free to negotiate with other people who are interested. So I'm going to tell you this actually happened on a condo a couple years ago, and my agent had the buyer, and we didn't find out until everything was completed, and they came up with that. And guess what? The condo association wanted to buy it. So what do you think happened with our buyer?
That they got an attorney.
Yep. And they were tipped. And guess what? They were entitled to all of their inspection money, anything they had spent. But they also went after the part of being inconvenienced because they had sold their house. They were planning on moving in there. So then we ended up, we didn't go to court, but they got a nice sum of money. So if you're listing something and you suspect there might be a first right of refusal, you should be checking on that. I also want to tell you that, yeah, go ahead and put that up. It's fine. So that buyer got all of their money back, but we just had this happen. Just so you know, first right of refusals aren't just in condos in the Central West End. There's also, this just happened in Clayton Terrace in Frontenac. That homeowners association has a first right of refusal as well.
Now, Lynn, for the sake of understanding, as a listing agent selling that said condo, they would have to describe that or explain that in their MLS information, correct? That
Yes.
the condo association has first right of refusal, and upon, whether they accept or deny, they basically have the seller has a say to sell, but they really don't have a say on who, if the condo association will take it for the price that they're agreeing to want to sign off on the other side, then the condo association purchases that.
That's right. And so that seller, they should know that that's their situation, but the seller claimed they had no idea.
It's
But it
also
cost
on the
them-
resale cert, isn't it, Lynn?
What's that?
Isn't that question on the resale cert? First right of refusal?
Yeah, but
On
they,
the condo
they said
resale
they
certificate?
said they didn't know. That's the problem. They said they didn't know. And
I
maybe
know
they
it's a-
didn't.
It's in the indentures.
Yeah.
But I
Who
feel
reads
like
it?
it's on the resale cert too, but I can look.
Yeah,
Well, can
the
the
problem is
because
people don't read it, or they've lived there a long time and they don't remember, that sort of thing. It can be a costly mistake. But if you have, if you're listing a condo, you might just ask them, say, I just want to make sure you don't have a first right of refusal. Just to avoid further issues.
And so the association would have to, at the very least, match that offer? Is that it?
Yes, correct. They have to match it. I see this as a potential discrimination case.
I do too.
So they get to see the other offer, right? They get to see the people's names, they see all the terms, and then they can say, okay, we're gonna buy it. And somebody could say, you know what, I think they didn't let me buy it because I'm of a certain nationality or whatever. I don't know.
Lynn,
I don't like it.
it is number one on the resale cert. Does the board or association have the first right of refusal?
But a lot of people say they don't know.
but you know what, when you
can
look
find
at
out,
the,
just, call the association and ask them. Simple.
well,
but-
if you do find out, can the listing agent be proactive and then have the seller, the potential seller, call the association and say, you have a right to buy this because I'm going to list it? Can they do it that way, or do they have to wait till they have an offer in hand to go to them?
Typically, they want to see the other offer before they make an offer because they don't know what it's going to bring. So they want to
That's
see
kind
the
of-
other offer first. Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of stinky though, isn't it? That they
Yeah,
can see what
I
the other
agree.
offer is and
Yeah.
they can beat it. That's really bad.
I think the importance of getting that condo research right out of the gate is vital. A lot of times we are asking for it after the fact, so we're not even sure what point in time do you get it, so that'd be more reason to make sure you get it right away.
But it costs money, doesn't it, Mary?
It does, but you got to get it anyway. We
But
do not.
But what if you don't ultimately sell it, then you're stuck paying $200 or $300 for a condo, resale.
Well, here's the issue with getting it too far in advance. Because what if you get it today and you got it on MLS, and then tomorrow, one of the owners in the condo association falls down
Yeah.
the steps. And there's gonna be litigation probably, because they said, somebody left a banana peel on the staircase and they fell down. Or someone, there's some sort of litigation that happens. That's the issue in getting it too far in advance. There's pros and cons to it.
So maybe when you get an accepted contract would be a good time, you think?
Yes,
Definitely.
when you're supposed to. Yep. Okay, we're gonna move on. You have the buyer. They wrote an offer and it didn't get accepted. Do you walk away or do you try to get the seller to accept a backup offer? I'm gonna tell you this week, had 2 transactions where we had the listing and they thankfully had backup offers. And they were good offers without having to go back, putting it back on the market and try to call a bunch of agents to say, hey, by the way, I know you showed my property, but the first deal fell apart. And taking days and maybe a week to try to get another offer when if you have a backup, you're already set to go. Make that the primary. If you're the buyer's agent and you don't want your earnest money tied up on that property, write in there that the earnest money will be deposited upon becoming the primary contract. Because I know that's a fear, like you're giving them several $1,000s as a backup and you don't want your money being held up because something better might come along. Just make it contingent of, it's going to be deposited upon becoming the primary offer.
Lynn, I thought they couldn't deposit the earnest until they became primary.
That's what
Oh,
I
yeah,
thought.
they
as
can.
well.
They can deposit. A lot of people don't like to take it, but because the contract, if you write in there, it's going to be deposited in 3 days. That's what you're supposed to do. I just write in there, don't deposit until you're the primary. That's the best way to handle it.
Question.
Yep.
So if that was the case, and then they find another property and that first initial backup offer actually does fall out with their first buyer and they do want to accept that offer, what about the second situation? If they found another property,
The
even though
buyer can walk at any time with notification before being notified that they're primary. That makes sense? Okay.
I wanna dig in a little more to Jamie's question, Lynn, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because I think she brought up a good way on how to look at it in another direction. I think she was mainly meaning, so her clients are back up to an offer, but yet they go and look at another offer, right? Let's say they write on that said other property, but then they become the primary on the first one. They've been notified that the primary. What happens then?
No, you just bought 2 houses probably.
Gotcha.
You'll have to
That's
get
what
an
I was.
inspection. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So
So,
that
here's what I-
was that
can
kind
I
of what you were
say
trying to ask,
this?
Jamie?
Here's what I would do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So
that's what
on
you were
the-
trying to ask. Yeah. Do you want to
Yeah.
elaborate a little more in detail on that, Lynn?
Yeah, on the second one, Jamie, I would probably write in contingent upon being released from a previous offer and give yourself 24 hours. Because all you have to do is notify the first one that you wrote, that you're walking.
Okay.
And the writer says you can get out at any time.
You're back up or something.
Thank you.
And you're saying if it doesn't fall and they accept it, it's saying you're under contract. That's what Lynn is saying, which is true. But you go out and, sorry, guys, we're having an inside combo with the same thing. If you want to keep going.
Okay. All right, so you represent the seller, you have an accepted offer. The earnest money's to be deposited within 3 days. Do you, as the listing agent, check to make sure the money was deposited?
Yeah.
Please do. If you're not doing that, please do it. You need a receipt anyway to make your packet complete for the audit. But there are agents out there that aren't depositing. Is that against the law? Yep. But how do we track it down? What's the best way to know that we got a serious buyer, that we're tying up our property? Let's make sure that the earnest money was deposited. Hopefully you're doing it at one of our preferred title companies, and I promise they'll get it to you right away. Get you a receipt that it was deposited in a timely manner. And then we'll go back to what we talked about with Mona at the beginning of the conversation this morning. And that is, I prefer you have your earnest money held with the title company and not a brokerage. Mona, are you still there? So there is a brokerage out there. Mona, are you there? Yes. Anyway, there is a company that, and it's Berkshire Hathaway Alliance, that and most of their agents, their buyer's agent, write that their company will hold the earnest money. And if at some point they determine that their buyer has fulfilled their part of the deal, they'll release the earnest money without a mutual release. So I recommend you don't do that. If you get that offer, I would counter back and say the money's to be held by the title company.
Lynn, how did they get through that with the MREC? How are they able to? Because we were always taught you have to have mutual signatures agreed upon for, that's the whole reason of escrow.
Yeah.
And then to follow that, you know, I've never heard of that. Like, I've never heard of that.
And they've done it. Mona just had it happen. And I personally have had it happen. So I know for a fact they do it. And they say, well, they didn't close on time. So the next day they're giving the money back, and we have no recourse to try to prove at that point that we were hoping we had the earnest money, so we had some negotiation power, but they've already returned the money. And they're willing, I don't know why, but they're willing to put their neck on the line with that. I
Well,
personally
here in our
would never do that.
organization, here at our organization, our agency, guys, you have options to prefer leave your escrows at title, right? Because they actually have to have both signatures. And if you choose to have escrow held at Remax, we require 2 signatures for releases. So if you guys run into a deal in a Berkshire Hathaway deal, alliance with another state agent on the other end, do not use their escrow. Do not let them use their own escrow agency. Then is that what you
Nope.
agreed to, Lynn?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Is
And you
that-
know what? What do we tell our sellers? Hey,
I don't
we've
know.
got $5,000 earnest money here. We'll keep that. If they don't do this, they don't do that. And then all of a sudden we find out that they've already released it. So don't get yourself in that situation. I'm not carrying tattletales here. That's a fact. I don't like to say anything bad about another company. It's just factual. That's how they handle it. So.
And if you don't get a completely signed mutual release, it's disputed escrow. It's not, agreed upon distribution. They're just taking that risk that they're gonna win it.
Yep. Okay, so here's my last thing. This is happening. Okay, so let's say rain, go away. With the amount of rain that we're having, there's a good chance that basements that never leaked will, and gutters will overflow, etc. We've discussed the final walkthrough numerous times on these calls, and I've also strongly recommend that you do that, but you never do a final walkthrough for your client, ever. Because if you miss something, who's liable?
You are.
You are, yeah. So here's what happened. I'll give you a real scenario. Yes, so our agent, the buyer's agent, and did the final walkthrough 3 days prior to closing. Basement's dry. Goes yesterday, after closing, after it's been funded, and we've got water coming in from all over. Now, they disclosed that there was a corner of the basement that got damp during heavy rains. So the agent came back with a sarcastic response. We are not getting anything fixed because we had to give you, that it didn't appraise and they had to come down on their price. And she was using that as an excuse to not get that basement repaired. So this probably won't end nicely, but I do want to say this because this is important. Let's say you're doing the final walkthrough the morning of and the basement's leaking, and the buyer looks at you and they say, hey, Chuck, I'm not closing. This basement's leaking and they said it wasn't going to close. What are you, as a buyer's agent, what are you going to say to them?
Well, first of all, we'll do a final walkthrough notice and give it to the seller, but the buyer, you have to close.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm going to say this, and I hope everybody writes this down because I've had it happen and I've been in court over it. So you never tell someone they shouldn't close. The answer should always be, I can't give you any legal advice. You need to get an attorney. Don't tell them not to close. Don't tell them they have to close.
Oh.
Never tell them, you can't give them advice about that. So this situation happened to me about 5 years ago. It was Christmas Eve morning. the agent walks down in the basement and it was a rehab, it was a flipper. And they're walking around and suddenly their shoes are swishing in this nice brand new carpet with water. So they called me on a conference call and said, what should we do? And I said, whatever you want to do, if you're not going to close or you're going to close, either way, I recommend that you call your attorney first. Because the listing agent said they had dropped a 5-gallon bucket of water on the floor and it didn't clean up. Well, based on what I'm hearing, I can literally hear the swishing as they're walking. That doesn't sound like a 5-gallon bucket of water to me on carpet. So they closed and it did go to litigation and everybody got sued. And I remember going downtown for an E&O claim, sitting across the table from John Rahoy, and he said, Lynn, what was your answer? What did you tell him? And I told him what I said. And he goes, I wish I could teach every broker and real estate agent in St. Louis. That's what you should say. You don't tell people close or not to close. They need to contact legal counsel.
And that's because we have a good broker who know what to do.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm just telling you that situation, and we did nothing wrong. We had no idea, but I'm telling you, we all got included in the lawsuit.
I remember that.
That's what people do when they sue. It's whether you did anything wrong or not, generally speaking, everybody goes in.
Oh, yeah.
And guess what? It wasn't a 5-gallon bucket of water, obviously. It was backed up water and sewer. So, all right, anybody have questions about anything they want to talk about? Things that have happened this last week or so?
No, I think you about covered that.
Well, these are all scenarios that have happened in the last.
Kay has a question, Lynn.
Yeah.
I have a question on backup offers. How many backups can a seller accept?
Great question. And I actually called the legal line because I thought, well, there shouldn't be a limit, right? Sorry. There is no limit to the number of backup offers you can take as long as you keep them in sequential order and you let the buyer's agents know what order they're in.
Okay.
What form do you need if you accept a second offer that's a backup? What form do you need?
The backup writer.
You need a backup writer. Because guess what? If you accept that second offer without that writer, you sold the property twice and we're in big trouble. Big trouble.
Hey, Corey, do you have a question? I see a hand on your thing.
Oh, sorry, did I put a hand up?
That was mute.
It looks like it.
Yes.
It was
Oh, no,
a
I'm sorry.
mute.
You know what? That's us. I apologize.
Oh.
Sorry, Corey.
No problem.
Hey,
It looks like a mute thing. Now that's mute.
yeah, we're good. We're good.
Okay, I
Good
appreciate
stuff.
all
Good
of
stuff,
you.
Mike.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank
Lynn,
you.
great
for all you
stuff.
do.
Yeah,
Thank
Okay.
you.
Lynn.
Thank
You
you.
guys.
Bye.
Guys.